Hello everybody, welcome back to my RC Plane channel. I'm James and I'm continuing on with this Balsa USA Smoothie 40 RC Plane kit build. So as you can see here, I have the plans laid out for the fuselage, and that's going to be the next major step of this build. If you've been watching my channel or been watching this build, you'll know that I've spent a lot of time building the wing to this point, and there's a lot of videos on that. So it's nice to sort of just kind of move on to another part of the plane. After a while, when you've been building like a certain part, I always find it sort of like refreshing to go ahead and move on to something new. So I'm really looking forward to starting the fuselage, and that's what I'm going to start doing today. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about some of the design features or the construction features of the fuselage. So to start with, the sides of the fuselage are going to be a very long plank of balsa that goes along the entire length of the fuselage. And it's going to form sort of a box structure. And here it is looking down on top of it. Not too exciting. Obviously it tapers down as it gets toward the tail section. And then the front section, there's going to be these plywood doublers to help strengthen up this area of the fuselage. And that's shown right here on the plans right here. So here's this piece here is going to set on here like this. And then the doubler is going to go right there like that on top of there. This is kind of typical construction. And then there's going to be a series of like these bulkheads. There's going to be the firewall, which is a quarter inch piece of plywood. What do I do with that? Here it is. There is the firewall. And then there's going to be a series of these bulkheads that are going to go in. There's going to be one here, one over here, one back here. And then in the tail section, there's just going to be a small, probably like a piece of square stock to kind of bring it all together in the tail. And then up on top, there's going to be this turtle deck structure. And here's a cross section of that. And that's just basically going to be formed by these smaller kind of, they're not really bulkheads or anything, but they're just sort of these little profiles that are going to be placed like right here, 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 and here toward the back. And then on top of that is going to be this piece of block balsa. So this is going to have to be shaped to this kind of shape you see here. Here's the piece of balsa up on top. In the front here, there's going to be a hatch formed out of this block of balsa. It's going to have to be shaped, which is this guy right here. And then it's going to tie into sort of this area where the cockpit is, and that's going to be this guy right here. So you can see there's going to be a lot of shaping and cutting like we did on the wing. And then on the bottom, the front here is going to be this piece, which is going to form this lower portion of the front of the fuselage, sort of like that cowl area. All right, so let me get this stuff out of the way here. And here's the firewall. I'm going to come back to that. This section here, this is going to be where the landing gear ties into. This is the piece of the landing gear stock, which is a piece of plywood, is going to go right there. And then looking down on sort of up in the front area of the airplane, there's going to be this sort of, again, another more doublers. And then there's going to be some triangular stock to kind of bring this all together, because this is going to have to get shaped and kind of brought down. So it has to be built up so that you can do that. All right, again, so here's the cross section through sort of this turtle deck area behind the canopy. And here's the cross section of the front lower section in the front portion of the airplane, which is going to be right here. And the reason this is open is because I think, well, just to make room for the engine. And we'll talk about that in a second. And I think that's kind of basically it for the basic sort of pieces and structure. There are going to be some cross members that go, these are like, what are these, 3/16 inch square cross pieces. All right, so one thing I want to look at is going to be this firewall location. So in the instructions, what they tell you is that, you know, the firewall is located here and it's up against the doubler. Actually, let me pull one of the doublers out of here if I can pop it out. Right, hold on a second. Let me pop that out with an X-Acto blade. All right, I'm holding my camera, so I can only have one hand, so I got to do that off camera. So here's the plywood doubler. So again, this piece of balsa is going to go down on here like this, and then the plywood doubler is going to go like that right there. Now let me move this out of the way and bring our doubler back up on here. So the doubler is going to go again like right here. Let's see here, just right about there. And what you'll notice is that the firewall is basically right here. So the doubler kind of butts up against the firewall, or vice versa. The firewall butts up against the doubler like that. So the thing is, though, is that the location of the firewall may change depending on your engine size. And this is in the instructions. Basically, the instructions are telling you that based on your engine size, you may have to move the firewall forward or back a little bit so that it fits in the right location relative to the spinner and to the end of this cowl section right here. All right, so let me grab my engine. So I'm going to be using this OS Max 46 AX2, and I have this engine mount for it, which is going to be right about here, and it's going to be mounted probably somewhere in the middle of the engine mount so that I have some room for the hose or the fuel lines to come through if I need to bring them through the middle, and I need to have some space also for the mounting bolts for the engine mount itself. So if I put this down sort of where the firewall is going to be located, let me do it on this one up here. Per the plans, it would be right about here somewhere. And what you'll see is that the engine sticks out really far, like almost an inch or so from the front. And what I have to do, obviously, is I have to move the firewall back a little bit. So usually you want sort of like the back plate of the spinner or the front portion of this part of the engine probably sticking out about 1/8 of an inch or so, 3/16, 1/8 of an inch gap between the front of the cowl and then the back of the spinner. So in order to do that, I'll have to put the engine back somewhere right about there, and I'll have to relocate the firewall back a little bit. And again, this is in the instructions, so it's nothing special. So what's going to have to happen, though, is I'm going to have to trim this doubler back so that the engine obviously the firewall will come back a little bit like this. So I'll have to trim the doubler back so it matches, and we'll measure all that out later, but that's basically the general idea. All right, so a little bit of an issue is that if I put the firewall where it was supposed to go per the instructions, and I move it back, about 1/2 inch or so, right about there, you'll see that there's going to be a gap. There would be a gap between the bottom of the firewall and, of course, the bottom of the fuselage. So the way I'm going to deal with that, which makes sense, is I'm going to go ahead and cut another firewall out. And I have this piece of plywood. This is birch plywood, which is the same 1/4 inch thickness. So I'll end up just cutting a piece a little bit longer so I can get the proper size for the firewall. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and make the measurements now for the location of the engine mount. And I took off the retaining nut, the prop nut, and the washer so that I have the end of the engine here kind of exposed. And so the engine is going to go somewhere about right there. Now I haven't decided if I'm going to mount the engine. I'm either going to mount it sideways or I'm going to mount it inverted. I'm probably going to go inverted with the engine. It doesn't really matter at this point how I do it because the location of the engine is going to be the same no matter what orientation it is. So this is going to go about somewhere like right about here. Okay, this is a Great Plains engine mount. It actually comes in 2 pieces, or it's 2 pieces, and they slide together. And it makes an adjustment because I think it goes from a 40 to a 60 size engine, so it can actually come out pretty wide, but it actually fits together nicely. And let me get this engine on here like this. So it'll be somewhere like that. Okay, so I'm going to put the engine about midway on this mounting rail. There's sort of a little angled, like about there's an angle here that gets in the way, so I can't push it all the way back. Plus I don't want it all the way back anyhow because I need to make room, as I mentioned, for the mounting bolts And then also for the fuel lines, if they come through here, the throttle hookup will probably come like right over here. So in any case, I'm going to put it right here in the middle, and I'm going to use that as sort of like my baseline and from my measurements. And then by being in the middle like this, I can always kind of make some final adjustments later if I have to bring it forward or back a little bit. But I'm going to go ahead and start sort of like in the middle. And I'm not going to measure it exactly. I'm just going to be somewhere like right about there. All right, so I'm going to try, push this a little bit forward here. I'm going to try to clamp this on here if I can get it to hold it. I'm not sure if it will or not, or how well it will work. Okay. All right, so there's my new firewall location. Pretend that's my firewall. Go right there. Looks pretty good. Let me grab this guy right here. All right, so that'll give me the room I need for the engine mount. All right, I'm going to check it with my protractor here. And I'm going to bring my line that. Okay. The reason I went beyond here is because, as we'll see with the other bulkheads, is I have to transfer these lines beyond the fuselage, because I'm going to mark those locations with the bulkheads on that large balsa plank. That'll be in an upcoming step. Okay, well that's that. That was easy enough. Let me put these back on here. I don't want to lose these. Okay, as I mentioned, this is an OS Max 0.46 AXII. And looks like if I go upside down, like I mentioned, I'll be using this muffler out here like that. I was considering going sideways, and if I went sideways, oops, get this back on here. If I went sideways, I could use the original muffler also, but I also had this Pitts muffler, which actually looks really cool, because then it would be sticking out of the bottom like that. So I just haven't decided yet. The problem with going sideways is that the head of the motor or the engine is going to stick. It's going to stick about that far out of the side of the plane. And I don't know if I want to kind of see that. So again, I still have to kind of decide, but that's sort of the one way or the other. I am leaning, like I said, toward the mounting it upside down or inverted. All right, the other thing I have is just for kind of show, is I have this old OS FP 40. Now again, this plane, the lower end of the engine on this would be a 40 class, like this guy right here. And you can kind of see that if I did use this old FP on here, I would have probably plenty of room without having to modify the firewall. But I think this actually engine is not very powerful. I mean, it's a good engine. It's an FP engine. It's nice, but I think I need something a little beefier for this plane. Okay, so I'm not there yet, but eventually what's going to happen is this doubler, and obviously the plywood plank that goes along the side will be right here, and I'll have to transfer this line onto here so I can cut this to make room for the firewall that's going to be moved back. All right, the other thing I have is the spinner that I got for this thing. Oh, that's pretty nice. Huh, there's no That's not good. Didn't come with a little nut. Oh well, I think I have one of those. That's going to go right here, like that. So what's going to happen as you start to construct this, once you get all these blocks on here on the front of the fuselage, I'm going to have to mount the engine and then mount it with the spinner so that I can make these transitions and carve this block down to match the spinner kind of geometry. But that's a little ways off. Anyhow, that's really nice. Right, now that I have the firewall located, I have to extend, as I mentioned, these bulkhead lines out beyond the fuselage side so I can mark them carefully. That. There you are. Okay. All right, and I'll do the same for these two last ones. This one. All right, so now what I have to do is put these balsa planks down over the plan. And I'm going to put them on top of each other, actually, because I need to mark them both in the same spot. So I carefully want to make sure I get them lined up against each other in the right location, somewhere like that. All right, so actually I'm going to start by, I'm going to tape them together. I'm going to get them close. That. All right. Okay. Really, probably the most important spot is going to be right here where the wing's going to go, and make sure that's lined up, because the edges I can trim if I had to, but these look pretty good right there. Okay. One thing the instruction says, or tells you, is that the plans may be a little stretched or a little bit off, I guess probably due to printing. And so you have to be a little bit careful. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure that the wing root here is in the right location, because this is going to be a control point for this, with this bulkhead here, and then with this one back in here. And then I can always trim off the edges or the ends if I need to, but I don't want to mess with the wing root area. So this is going to go right about there. And it may be hard to see, but this actually sticks over about 1/4 of an inch on the front here. And then the back piece is actually angled weird. It's got this, kind of goes off on a triangle, or kind of like an angle like this. But the back of this is actually going like this. The tail section is actually like that. So they do mention you have to make some trimming. So obviously this kit has sort of changed over the years a little bit, and the pieces that you're getting in the box, I have found, don't always exactly match the pieces on the plan or in the instruction. So there are a few little minor things. None of it's a big deal, but if you're not kind of prepared for that, it may kind of confuse you a little bit. So anyhow, just take your time. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pin this down onto the building board. Now I don't have my wax paper down here yet. I'll do that later. I'm going to get this done because it's going to be easier to sort of see the lines through here and such. So I'm going to go ahead and do that after I get this marked out. I'll lay my wax paper down to protect the plans, but for now I'm going to leave it off. All right, so I'm going to go right here. Dude, like that. All right, so it's kind of hard to see with the other camera angle, but again, I got these wood planks lined up as close as I could, and then of course here's some of these bulkhead markings. I actually marked the tail section also. You can kind of see here, obviously this is going to get chopped off. Not sure why it's like that anyhow. And then here's another bulkhead. Here's another bulkhead. Here's the firewall, and again the front's going to get trimmed a little bit also, but that's okay. So these two sheets are lined up nicely against each other, and now I can go ahead and transfer these lines onto the planks, and that's where the bulkheads will be then glued to, or lined up to glue. Okay, now so I can go ahead and mark these lines onto, and I'll mark them on the edges of this sheeting. And it's kind of dark because of the laser. I probably could have sanded that down a little bit to make it lighter, but I don't want to mess with it. So I'm just going to take my time, and I'm going to use the square here. Go right up against that edge. All right, and then I'll just go ahead and mark it right like that. I can see that. Okay. I'll do this one here. Those are my two marks. I can do it on this side over here. Actually, this one's going to be right on the edge here anyhow. This one will be right about there. Okay. Okay, so I did this side too, so it's going to be hard to see because this is dark in here anyhow, and it's kind of small, kind of far away, but now all I got to do is I have the marks kind of just right on top here on the edge, and I'll draw this first one on here. Just kind of connect the dots right about there. And I'll have to do the same thing to the bottom piece once I remove it, but right now I'll do this like this on here. Okay, so that'll be the location of the firewall. It's gonna go like right here. And of course I'll have to get a bigger piece, but it'll be just like that. Okay, so I'm going to do that for all these, and we'll come back. All right, so I marked each one of these. This guy back here, and let me get over here and take a look at the back tail section. Yeah, so the tail section, you can kind of see it's going to be trimmed right off like that. There's a little piece of wood's going to go right in there. So the next step is going to be to transfer the firewall, or basically to trim these doublers. Plywood doublers, have to mark those to where they're going to be trimmed. So I'm going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to take this doubler out of here. Should be using my cutting mat, but it's okay. Pop this out real quick. Those, I'm going to move this pin out of here. All right, so let me get these lined up. Let me tape these together like I did with the other one. What's funny is I was looking at the instructions and, you know, kind of looking at how to put these lines on here and stuff, and I was thinking that's going to be pretty easy. It's pretty simple to do, and it actually is. It just takes a lot longer than I thought it would. Okay, so I got these doublers taped together. And this guy's going to go right on here, and I'm going to use the wing root as my basis. And get this lined up on here. All right, so I'm not really going to be able to pin this down because it's plywood. But I'll line it up like this. I'll put some weights on this. All right. So the nice thing about this is that you're working with wood, and you've always got some room for adjustments. So I'll go ahead and draw the back. It's not that important because it can only go one place. It can only go line up like that. All right, my camera had a little bit of a glitch in it, so I already marked this, but I'll just go ahead and show it really again real quick here. I just marked right here. And I don't need to mark the entire firewall because I'm just going to be cutting it off along the back line. So that's this line right here. And then I already marked the front or the top of it also. I thought I was recording, but I wasn't. All right, so I'm going to carefully draw the location where I'm going to cut the doubler back. Use my hand. Okay, so that'll be transferred to this side. I can just do this. And actually I only need to mark one side because I'm going to keep these taped together when I cut it, so the cut's in the same location, but I'll just do it for fun. Okay. Okay, well there we go. So if we did this right, let's pretend, let's put this here. And let me grab my engine. Okay, so this looks like it's pretty good. I just kind of eyeballing it to kind of see where it is, but yeah, I'm going to be trimming off this part here, and then it's kind of hard to see on the camera, but it'll be sticking out about 1/8 of it. I mean, I can adjust this either way anyhow, so it's cool. It's going to work just fine. All right, so that's going to be about it for this video. It took a little bit longer than I thought to transfer all these lines and to get the firewall located in the right location and all that. So yeah, so next video, I'll start building the fuselage up, putting the bulkheads on, putting the firewall, putting the doublers on, and moving forward with the fuselage build. So until then, thanks for watching my channel. I appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.